Before we begin, a word about what blacklisting actually means in the music industry. It is rarely official. There is rarely a memo. Nobody puts it in writing. What happens is slower, and in many ways crueler than that. A promoter stops returning calls. A radio programmer quietly removes songs from rotation. A label executive lets a contract expire without renewal and doesn't explain why. An artist is suddenly unavailable for television appearances that used to be routine. The machinery stops, and the artist is left standing in a studio that no longer has their name on the booking sheet. What you are about to hear are 12 real documented cases where that machine was used against people whose only crime was telling the truth or standing in someone's way. Number 1. Billie Holiday, Blacklisted, by the United States government. The most powerful narcotics agent in America decided that one woman's song was a threat to national security. His name was Harry Anslinger, Commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and the song that infuriated him was Strange Fruit. Billie Holiday first performed Strange Fruit at Cafe Society in New York City in 1939. It was a protest song not about drugs, not about crime, about the lynching of black people across the American South, about bodies hanging from poplar trees.
Strange fruit.
When Holiday performed it, nightclub owner Barney Josephson created a ritual around the moment. The waiters stopped all service. The room went completely dark except for a single spotlight on Holiday's face. No talking, no movement, no encore. Holiday's own record label, Columbia Records, refused to record it. They were afraid of the reaction from Southern record retailers and from affiliates on their co-owned CBS radio network. So Holiday went to an independent label, Commodore Records. She sang it a cappella for the owner, Milt Gabler. He wept. He recorded it. It became her best-selling record, and Anslinger heard it. He sent federal agents after Holiday for years. He surveilled her, followed her, built a file. He found her addiction to heroin, an addiction she had developed after years of exploitation and abuse, and used it as a weapon. His agents sold her heroin to set her up for arrest. She was convicted and sent to prison for a year. When she was released, New York authorities revoked her cabaret performer's license. For a singer whose livelihood was the New York nightclub circuit,
For the wind to suck.
this was a career death sentence. She appealed, denied. She appealed again, denied again. She could perform in concert halls. She could tour. But the intimate venues where she had built her reputation, the rooms where she had performed Strange Fruit, to stun silence, were permanently closed to her. Billie Holiday died on July 17th, 1959. She was 44 years old. She had 70 cents in her bank account and $750 in cash strapped to her leg. Number 2. Florence Ballard, Blacklisted, from the group. She was the one who named them. In January 1961, when Berry Gordy's assistant brought a list of potential group names to 3 young women from Detroit's Brewster housing projects, it was Florence Ballard who looked at the list and chose the Supremes. Diana Ross didn't like it. She thought it sounded like a male group. Florence chose it anyway. Florence Ballard was also, by nearly every credible account, the strongest singer of the 3. Marvin Gaye himself said she had a voice that was probably the strongest of the 3 girls. During early recording sessions, she stood 17 feet from her microphone because her voice was so powerful, it was overloading the boards. But Berry Gordy had already made his decision. Diana Ross had something that Florence didn't, the ability to appeal to white pop audiences. And at Motown, crossover was everything. Gordy systematically stripped Florence of her role. He moved Diana to lead singer. He criticized Florence's weight, her timing, her presence in front of the other girls. in rehearsals. Florence began to drink. She began missing sessions and appearances. One night in Las Vegas in 1967, Gordy grabbed her arm backstage at the Flamingo Hotel and told her, "If you go on stage tonight, I'll throw you off." Florence didn't go on. Cindy Birdsong was already dressed in her clothes, standing in the wings. The replacement had been planned before the conversation even happened. Florence was 24 years old. She had co-founded the group that was outselling everyone except the Beatles. And she was being walked out the back door of a casino with nothing but a settlement offer in her pocket. That settlement was criminal. Motown Vice President Michael Roshkind offered her $15,000, paid in installments of $2,500 over 6 years in exchange for signing away all future royalties. But before we go any further, if nobody ever told you about this channel, think about how close you came to never finding this. Don't let that happen to somebody else, and don't let it happen to you again. Hit subscribe right now. Turn on notifications, because where we're going next in this story, you cannot afford to tap out. All right, now back to it. Number 3, Sam Cooke, the song that brought the FBI to his door. He was the biggest black star in America. He owned his own record label. He owned his own publishing company. He controlled his masters. He was the most business-savvy black artist in the music industry, at a time when almost no black artist was allowed to be any of those things. And the United States government was watching him. The FBI opened a file on Sam Cooke in the early 1960s. They monitored his connections to the civil rights movement. They noted his friendships with Malcolm X, Cassius Clay, and Jim Brown. Then Cooke wrote, "A change is gonna come." It started after he and his entourage were turned away from a Holiday Inn in Shreveport, Louisiana in October 1963. The desk clerk said there were no vacancies. Cooke refused to leave. His wife whispered, "They'll kill you." He said, "They ain't gonna kill me. I'm Sam Cooke." He was arrested for disturbing the peace. On the drive to the next city, still raw with anger, the song began forming. He recorded it January 30th, 1964, at RCA Studios in Hollywood. He gave his arranger, Renee Hall, no instructions except, "Write the kind of orchestration it deserves." I was born by the river. His regular drummer was so overawed he couldn't play. Earl Palmer was recording next door. They knocked on the wall and asked him to step in. When the session was done, Cooke played it for his friend Bobby Womack. Womack said, "It sounds like death." Cooke agreed. He performed it once on television The Tonight Show, February 7th, 1964. Then he chose never to perform it live again. When the song was finally released as a single, the verse most clearly about racism, the one about being told don't hang around downtown, was edited out of the version sent to radio stations to make it acceptable for white airplay. 11 days before the single was released, Sam Cooke was shot and killed at a Los Angeles motel. He was 33 years old. Rolling Stone placed "A Change Is Gonna Come" at number 1 on their list of the 100 best protest songs of all time in 2025. The full verse about racism that was removed from the radio edit is in the original recording. It always was. They just didn't want you to hear it. Number 4, Nina Simone, blacklisted for being exactly what America needed. She was supposed to be a concert pianist. Nina Simone had studied at the Juilliard School and applied for a scholarship to the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. She was denied. She believed until her dying day that she was denied because she was black. She started playing piano at an Atlantic City nightclub to survive and discovered her voice was as extraordinary as her hands. By the early 1960s, she was a force. Then the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham was bombed. 4 black girls were killed. The youngest was 11 years old. Nina Simone sat down at her piano and wrote Mississippi Goddamn in 45 minutes. She said it came out of her in a rush of fury, hatred, and determination.
Butterflies all having fun, you know what?
Southern radio stations banned it immediately. Some physically broke the records and mailed the pieces back to her label. The FBI opened a file on her. They monitored her performances, her associations, her politics. They watched her sing at Selma. They watched her demand faster change than Dr. King was willing to ask for.
You know how I feel. It's a new dawn.
They watched her say that she supported violent revolution if necessary. As her political activism intensified, her record deals quietly expired. Labels declined to renew. Promoters stopped booking her at mainstream venues. The radio playlists that had featured her began replacing her with safer artists.
You know how I feel. Oh, free.
In 1974, she titled her last American album, It Is Finished. Then she left the United States entirely, living first in Liberia, then Barbados, then Switzerland, then France. The FBI files on Nina Simone were destroyed. We will never know the full extent of what was in them. What we do know is that one of the greatest musicians of the 20th century
Stars when you shine.
spent the last 30 years of her life in exile from the country, whose hatred she had turned into art. Nina Simone died in France on April 21, 2003. Rolling Stone has placed her among the greatest singers of all time. America only fully claimed her after she was gone. Number 5. Marvin Gaye, blacklisted by his own label. Twice the first time, Berry Gordy called the song the worst record he'd ever heard in his life. The song was What's Going On? Gordy refused to release it, called it too political, too jazzy, too risky for Motown's crossover market. Marvin Gaye went on strike. He told the label, I will not record a single note until this song is released. Motown's Quality Control Committee agreed with Gordy. Stevie Wonder was reportedly the only person in the building who liked it. Then executive Harry Balk went behind Gordy's back. While the boss was on vacation, Balk pressed 100,000 copies and shipped them to radio stations across the country. Within days before the official release date, all 100,000 were gone. Orders for 100,000 more followed within the week. It became the fastest-selling single in Motown history. Gordy changed his mind immediately. He gave Gaye 30 days to complete a full album. Gaye did it in 10. What's Going On became the greatest album in R&B history. Rolling Stone named it the #1 album of all time in 2020. But the relationship never healed. In 1981, while Gaye was finishing his final Motown album titled In Our Lifetime, with a deliberate question mark, Gordy's team took the tapes without Gaye's knowledge. They edited the album. They removed the question mark from the title. They released it before Gaye had approved the final mix. Gaye was devastated. He said, "They took my painting and added a leg here, an arm there. That was that. I couldn't work with them anymore." He signed with Columbia Records. He moved to Ostend, Belgium, fleeing tax debts.
I can tell you, darling, that it's sexual healing.
A broken marriage, and a complete creative breakdown. In Belgium, he rebuilt. He recorded Sexual Healing. He returned to America. He won his first Grammy at the 1983 ceremony. On April 1st, 1984, the day before his 45th birthday. His father shot him during an argument at the family home in Los Angeles. He had spent his final decade fighting for the right to make the music that the world now calls the greatest ever made. The label he built it for called it the worst thing they'd heard. Number 6. Janet Jackson, 9/16 of a second. It lasted less than 1 second. February 1st, 2004. Super Bowl halftime show. Houston, Texas. 150 million viewers. Justin Timberlake reached across and tore a section of Janet Jackson's costume. Her breast was exposed for exactly 9/16 of a second. The cameras cut away. CBS chairman Les Moonves was furious. He had promised the NFL a family-friendly show. He demanded public apologies from both Jackson and Timberlake if either wanted to appear at that year's Grammy Awards airing on CBS. Timberlake agreed. He appeared at the Grammys, won an award, apologized on stage. The trade press called him the Teflon Man. Janet Jackson declined to apologize publicly. She was uninvited from the Grammys, where she had been scheduled to deliver a tribute to the late Luther Vandross. Then Moonves ordered a corporate blacklist. Viacom's subsidiaries MTV, VH1, and all Infinity Broadcasting radio stations removed Jackson's music from rotation. Her videos disappeared from television. Her songs vanished from radio. Non-Viacom stations followed suit. Clear Channel removed her music from hundreds of stations nationwide. Her 2004 album, Demita Joe, became the lowest-selling album of her career since 1984. She resigned from a film deal she had just signed. Even a Mickey Mouse statue wearing her Rhythm Nation costume was quietly removed from display at a Disney venue. Timberlake's career went the other direction. He released Future Sex/Love Sounds. He toured stadiums. He was invited to perform at the Super Bowl again in 2018. FCC Chairman Michael Powell, who had publicly called the incident classless, crass, and deplorable, admitted to ESPN 10 years later. It all turned into being about her. In reality, if you slow the thing down, it's Justin ripping off her breastplate. Janet Jackson was not inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame until 2019, despite being eligible since 2002. That induction came just 2 months after Moonves resigned from CBS amid sexual harassment allegations. 9/16 of a second, 15 years of consequences, only for Janet. Number 7. David Ruffin, The Greatest Temptation. They erased. He was the most distinctive voice they had. David Ruffin joined the Temptations in 1964. And sang lead on My Girl, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, I Wish It Would Rain, and I Know I'm Losing You, 4 of the most important R&B recordings of the decade. But Ruffin believed he was bigger than the group. He started arriving late sometimes, hours late, sometimes missing shows entirely. He demanded his name placed above the groups on marquees. He hired a limousine while his bandmates rode in a van. His cocaine use worsened. In 1968, the Temptations fired him and replaced him with Dennis Edwards. What followed was not just a firing, it was a deliberate erasure. Motown signed Ruffin to a solo deal, but gave him almost no promotion. Sure, his albums were released quietly and ignored just as quietly. The machine that had made the Temptations global was never switched on for David Ruffin as a solo act. His contract with Motown ended in 1975. No renewal was offered. He spent the rest of his career on nostalgia tours, smaller and smaller venues, his addiction worsening with each year that passed. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1989, but only as a member of the Temptations, not as a solo artist. Not as a legend in his own right. David Ruffin died of a cocaine overdose on June 1st, 1991. He was 50 years old. Eddie Murphy, who happened to be driving past, saw him collapse on a sidewalk and paid for the limousine that took him to the hospital. He had no money when he died, no recording contract. The voice that made Ain't Too Proud to Beg immortal had been made irrelevant by the same industry that built it. Number 8. Eartha Kitt, Blacklisted by the White House. She was at a White House luncheon, January 1968, hosted by Lady Bird Johnson. A social event for prominent women focused on juvenile delinquency. And Eartha Kitt stood up and told the First Lady of the United States exactly what she thought about the Vietnam War. She said, "You send the best of this country off to be shot and maimed. They rebel in the streets, they take pot, and they will get high.
Please, bring him home in one piece."
They don't want to go to school because they're going to be snatched from their mothers to be shot in Vietnam." Lady Bird Johnson burst into tears. The room went silent. The news spread within hours. The CIA opened a file on Eartha Kitt. The report described her as, and this is an official CIA document, a sadistic nymphomaniac. A character assassination designed to destroy her credibility and reputation. The White House quietly made calls. Within weeks, her American bookings began disappearing. Television appearances were canceled. Recording opportunities dried up. Film projects stalled. She was essentially unemployable in America for nearly 10 years. She moved to Europe to survive London, Paris, Germany, performing wherever venues would have her. Her American comeback came only in the late 1970s, when the political climate shifted enough for the industry to pretend it had never happened.
Don't worry, baby.
John, it's...
In 2001, the CIA files were declassified. The character assassination report became public record proof of exactly how frightened the most powerful men in the country were of one woman who stood up at a luncheon and told the truth. Eartha Kitt died on December 25th. 2008. She was 81 years old. She spent her final decade performing to packed houses, celebrated, adored, iconic. The White House had tried to erase her. She outlasted every single one of the men who tried.
Easy monkey do, let them stand. I'm enjoying the...
Number 9. Little Richard, Blacklisted by the industry. He invented rock and roll, and then the industry stole it from him. Not metaphorically, literally. When Tutti Frutti was released in 1955, Pat Boone immediately recorded a cover version. Pat Boone's version, softer, whiter, safer, outsold Little Richard's original on the pop chart. This was standard practice in the 1950s music industry. Take the black original.
Harvest Moon Contest, Jimmy and Jovita dancing to Little Richard and two.
Sanitize it. Sell it to white audiences through a white face. Pay the original artist as little as possible. Little Richard received almost nothing from the songs that launched rock and roll. His original contract with Specialty Records gave him a fraction of a cent per record sold. By the time he quit in 1957, convinced God had spoken to him after his tour plane caught fire mid-flight over Sydney Harbor, the industry had already extracted what it needed. He threw his jewelry into the harbor. He went home. He enrolled in a Seventh-day Adventist college. He became an ordained minister. He recorded gospel music that nobody promoted. His label dropped him. Radio stopped playing him. And while he was gone, Elvis Presley, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and dozens of others built their entire careers on the sound he had pioneered. He came back to rock and roll in 1962. Too late. The artists who had built their fortunes on his blueprint were now too big to be displaced. In 1986, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In its very first induction class, he received a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 1993. But his compensation from the original recordings that launched a global cultural revolution Minimal. The publishing rights? Gone. The masters. Someone else owned them. Little Richard died on May 9th, 2020. He was 87 years old. He had spent 65 of those years trying to get the music industry to acknowledge what it had taken from him. Until his last interview, he kept saying the same thing. I am the originator. I am the emancipator. I am the architect of rock and roll. He was right. He just wasn't paid like it. Number 10. Miriam Makeba. Lost her career for falling in love. She didn't do anything wrong. She fell in love. Miriam Makeba. Mama Africa was born in Johannesburg, South Africa.
We do down Johannesburg way. Everybody.
In 1932. Her music exposed apartheid to international audiences when most of the world didn't know what apartheid was. She performed at the White House for President Kennedy. She testified before the United Nations about conditions in South Africa. As a direct result, the South African government revoked her citizenship. She had no country to return to. She stayed in America. She built a celebrated career. She was welcomed, loved, necessary. Then in 1968, she married Stokely Carmichael, a Black Power activist who had just delivered speeches calling for the arming of Black Americans. The FBI was already monitoring him closely. The moment the marriage was announced, Miriam Makeba's American career ended. Concert bookings were canceled. Recording contracts were not renewed. Radio stations stopped playing her music. She went from celebrated global artist to industry outcast in what she later described as weeks, not months. She and Carmichael moved to Guinea. She spent the next 20 years in Africa and Europe performing for audiences who never forgot her, while America pretended she no longer existed. She returned in 1987 after Harry Belafonte personally arranged her welcome back. She won a Grammy in 1988 for a collaborative album with Paul Simon. She was accepted back. She was celebrated again. But she was 76 years old before she performed on American soil, to the recognition her talent had always deserved. Miriam Makeba died on November 9th, 2008 on stage in Italy after a concert. She received a standing ovation. She collapsed as she left the stage. Her final act on earth was performing. Number 11. James Brown. Blacklisted by the era he created. He prevented a riot. On April 4th, 1968, the night Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. James Brown went on live television in Boston and urged the black community to stay home, stay calm, trust in the process. The mayor of Boston later said James Brown single-handedly prevented the city from exploding that night. Across the country, dozens of cities burned. Boston did not.
Without the man, make everything.
That is the scale of the man. But by the late 1970s, disco had arrived, and James Brown's raw, percussive, gospel-drenched funk was not welcome on disco radio. His records stopped charting. His label Polydor gave him minimal support. Radio programmers who had treated his records as automatic ads began passing on them. The man who invented the groove that disco producers were sampling was locked out of the very format his own music had helped create. Personal and legal troubles deepened through the 1980s. A domestic violence arrest in 1988. A high-speed car chase across state lines. A prison sentence. Years of substance abuse publicly documented. The industry uses a man's personal destruction efficiently as cover for the professional abandonment it has already decided on. James Brown received a Kennedy Center honor in 2003, a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 1992, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 1986. But his commercial career never fully recovered. He spent his final years performing at venues that were a fraction of the stages he had once owned. James Brown died on Christmas Day, 2006. His estate was immediately plunged into legal battles over who owned his masters, his recordings, his image. In death as in life, the industry fought over the rights to his work while ensuring he received the smaller portion of what it was worth. Number 12. Lauryn Hill, blacklisted for refusing to be owned. She released The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill in 1998. It won 5 Grammys, the most wins for any female artist in a single Grammy night.
It's silly when girls sell their souls because it's sin. Look at where you be in, hair weaves like you're in.
It sold 19 million copies worldwide. Critics called it the greatest album of the decade. Then she disappeared. In 2002, she released an MTV Unplugged album, raw, unpolished, deeply personal, that the industry didn't know what to do with. And Columbia Records, which had celebrated her weeks earlier, quietly withdrew its support. Lauryn Hill spoke openly about her disillusionment. She said she had given everything to an industry that turned her art into product, and then discarded her when the product wasn't moving fast enough. In 2013, she pled guilty to failing to pay taxes on $1.8 million in income. She served 3 months in prison. She tours occasionally. She performs live, sometimes arriving hours late, sometimes not finishing sets in ways that have frustrated fans and closed industry doors. But she has never released a formal studio follow-up to Miseducation. The greatest R&B album of the 1990s remains the last thing she officially gave us. She explained why in a 2012 Tumblr post, "I was put in a position where the only way to protect myself and my family was to take a step back from a system that wasn't protecting the people who were feeding it." 27 years later, the miseducation of Lauryn Hill remains untouched. The industry celebrated it. Then it punished the woman who made it for refusing to keep making things on its terms.
Let's stop pretend. The one that pack pissed out by the waist, man, crissed out by the casement, still the name of the space.